Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Linuxfest Northwest, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we can review all the things on Linux things that couldn't be done and take your calls on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour. To be a part of the program, it's a free call. 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624, or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalai, your host. Delighted to be here with you this hour as another episode of the Ask Noah Show kicks off. We're live at Linuxfest Northwest. Thank you, Chase. And, you know, it's really great to actually have really good production help while I'm, so I don't have to try and figure all of this out my own. You know, it was just a couple of months ago that we did the one-year anniversary episode of the show, and it marked a shift in what the show represents. That line is part of the intro. We're here to do everything on Linux they said couldn't be done. It's not just a catchy line. It's not just a brochure filler. It's fundamentally who we are as a show and what this network stands for. And I'm proud of the commitment that everybody here has made and continues to make, and I hope that the Ask Noah show will be at the center of that Linux ecosystem for years to come, specifically FreeBSD on the desktop. I don't know who wrote that. Somebody wrote that into my show notes, FreeBSD on the desktop. Where's Alan Jude? It's pretty well, they've got an announcement. It's pretty standard to run a custom application or a custom appliance on Linux. And if you wanted bulletproof stability and security, it becomes a no-brainer on the server. But running a full-scale production on Linux, specifically audio-video production on the desktop, well, today, to a certain degree, that has actually become pretty standard. There are a lot of broadcasters that are doing that, but 3 years ago, with a home-built PC from Fry's, with 12 hours before the fest, with some second-hand USB capture cards and some C920s, we made that work. And that was unheard of, and it was crazy, and we did it. And we were the first to do it. Jupiter Broadcasting was the first entity that I'm aware of that was able to do a full-scale production under Linux, and I hope that we can continue to be the network that does it first on Linux, that pushes the envelope of Linux, not just on the server, but on the desktop. And this week has been full of stuff that would have been really easy to do on macOS or Windows. Easier, really, in a lot of ways. And Chris and I could have looked around and said, look at how many of these computers in this fest. Look at how many people that are bringing laptops and they're running Windows or macOS on it. Everybody else is doing it. Let's just do that. We could have loaded a few machines with Windows 10. We could have installed the drivers, rebooted, and uninstalled those drivers and installed the new ones to replace them with, and then reboot, and then turn off automatic updates and reboot again. And we could disable a Cortana and then reboot again, and probably reboot a third time because. And then reinstall the operating system from scratch when we hit a brick wall, and then reboot a few more times. And we'd have a mostly functional system, I think. But we didn't do that. And it was through that commitment to Linux that we have gotten here today, which for the most part, barring a couple of audio issues, it's been a pretty solid system, yeah?
You know what? I was making the example earlier. You know, we've been doing this here for 5 years now, and every year it's become more and more solid, more and more dependable. And this is the first year that I remember that things have been really solid. And the USB audio thing, that can happen on any platform. That's just a technical limitation. But this is dependable. This is the way it should be, and something that we can encourage people to do.
Chase, our technical director, the guy who's running the board today, helping us out, making the production possible, doing all of the video switching. I do want to ask, you know, we even have the hardware to fix that particular audio issue.
We do.
Yeah?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
And it wouldn't be a function of taking the broadcast machine offline for 20 minutes, and it's like, you know, we've got it working well enough that we decided not to fix that particular issue.
Right, and that's something that anybody on any platform would honestly run into. That's not a Linux issue or anything like that.
It's a limitation of the hardware, really.
It's a hardware limitation. It's something that's been there for, 20 years or how long USB is.
Sure. So,
yeah, no, we're fine. It's been great.
This is something I want to be a theme of this particular episode of the show. I want to talk about real nerds, and I'm surrounded by real nerds, people who care about technology, people who care about building the next generation of cool things. And I went back. I had a discussion with the gentleman we're going to have on the show here in just a couple of moments, and I had the good fortune of having dinner with this guy. And our conversation last night reminded me of a blog post I wrote back in middle school, high school maybe. I mean, a long, long time ago. And I went and dug it up. What the modern nerd lacks is the ability to create. When I was in middle school, I would sit in my room and take wires, batteries, capacitors, resistors, and a 555 timer, which is an IC, which is a blast for anyone who hasn't played with one, and I would put electronics together. To me, a nerd is anyone who looks at a problem and thinks, what do manufacturers make that I could use in, and then insert your project here. Today's nerd looks for what manufacturers can make for me and what I can play with. It seems that no longer is there an interest in building or creating, but rather reading an owner's manual and quote-unquote discovering features that engineers have put into the products that I buy. I once told a guy that was complaining his computer speakers didn't have a second input that he could build a small box that fed the speaker 2 inputs and a mute switch for each. Please realize that when I say this, I'm not talking about some cardboard cutout with electrical wires taped together, although I'd be dishonest if I didn't acknowledge that much has been learned from just those kinds of haphazardly constructed devices. In a pinch, I'll take duct tape, electrical tape, and some tinfoil, and you'd be surprised what can be accomplished. But you can buy project boxes from Radio Shack. You can order custom ones online. It would be a fraction of what those audio breakout boxes sell for at Office Max or Best Buy, but the modern-day nerd wasn't interested. He looked at me like I was batting up crazy for suggesting such a thing. Now, the best thing about Linuxfest, in fact, the best thing about any Linuxfest, is that there are a group of people that gather for the collective ability to hang out and get to know one another. And I opened the show with this last year, the first episode that we did from Linuxfest Northwest on the Ask Noah show, and I said that I felt that it was the human connection that sets Linuxfest apart from the Microsofts or Apple Fests. Apple users tend to obsess over the hardware. They focus on what the hardware can do and what the value that the hardware bring. In Microsoft, people tend to focus on the software and what innovations the software can bring. But Linux users, well, we like hardware, we definitely like software, but we light up when we see other Linux users. And I guess if I think about it, there is a small part of me that believes that a small function of that is finding another Linux user on the same planet. It's sort of like finding a unicorn swimming in the middle of the ocean. But this year, and I've seen this over and over again, not only at this fest, but other fests, there is one thing that separates us from the Linux community, and that is that the thing that separates the Linux community from the rotten half-eaten apples and micro-can't-write softwares of the world is that we value the community. And we sit around at dinner and we talk about Linux, but we also talk about human connections, and we talk about geeks and nerds, and we form this bond that it's a fraternity that is blind to race, sex, religion, skin color. The only requirement to be a part of that fraternity, the only requirement to be a part of that group is you have to love technology. And I met a guy, his name is Jeff, and he reminded me of that blog post that I wrote so many years ago, and you're a true nerd. You're a true geek. You're a guy that gets it. And I spent hours talking to you at the dinner table last night. I'm happy to welcome you into the Ask Noah show. Welcome, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. It's a real honor to be here.
So talk to me about what it was like getting started as a geek, as a nerd. When you were a kid, you were playing with wires. You weren't going to Best Buy and buying, the Xbox and looking to see what features it could do, what cloud things it could control. You wanted to turn a light on or off. You were doing that yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And any way I could solve a problem, I would try to do myself. Any toy I had that had something in it, any motor, any kind of controller, something like that, it got torn apart. Nothing lasted in my house.
So you wanted to learn what was inside of the electronics.
Yeah, I wanted to know how it worked. I wanted to use it to make other things work the way I wanted them to work.
So you see this like a remote control car, and it has a remote with it, and you push the remote forward, and you notice the motor spins one way. Push the remote back, the motor spins the other way. Then you start thinking, man, what if I attach that to a fan blade, and I could blow air one way, or I could suck air the other way, and you start learning technology or visualizing technology or understanding technology at this component, basic building block level, almost Minecraft-like way of approaching it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, anytime you can get your hands on something and play with anything, even operating systems with Linux, you get your hands on it, start playing with it, you're going to learn it. It doesn't matter what it is. And for me, as a kid, it was electronics. It was essentially my toys. From Kinects to Legos, those are the biggest things in my house. That's what I had most of. Mm-hmm. And like I said, if I had an RC car that broke, or even if it didn't break, I just ended up taking it apart and I'd throw the motor onto a Kinects car or something else I'd make, or make it do something that obviously it wasn't supposed to do. And that was always my what I had the most fun doing, is making something do what it's not supposed to do.
So these days, how do you think that understanding and that deep dive of technology has led to what you're doing today?
Well, it helps you solve problems. You can go up to an issue and see a problem, and as long as you can understand that problem, then you can understand there are many, many ways to solve it. And like you said, you don't have to go buy an appliance to solve this problem. You can build a solution.
And when you take that built solution, then now you've gotten to a point where your day job requires you not only to solve problems, but to, how do I put this gently, but understand bare wire. Like, you're not afraid of bare copper.
Yeah, no, exactly. I deal with high voltage stuff, DC and AC, and you need to understand how that works and when it's on or off. I mean, that's the most important part. But to some aspect, you need to understand a little bit of what's going on in electronics as well. And the biggest part is problem solving, and I can't push that enough. My growing up building things, learning how to take things apart and rebuild them into other things, helped me learn how to problem solve. So when I have an issue as a technician, I need to fix that problem. And just years and years and years of fixing problems that didn't really exist helped me fix real problems today.
And the ability to, like, so going back to the bare wire stuff, if you have a configuration or a layout or a system that was not designed to do something, if you have the ability to take that thing completely apart and add parts in or take parts out or connect things that weren't designed to be connected together, you know, that opens you up to a whole different range of a whole range of flexibility that just simply didn't exist.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. You can do whatever you want. I mean, that's what's great about it. And the best thing is you own it. You own what you're doing. You're not buying something and stuck at the limitation of whatever that something is. You now have built something that you completely own, you completely control, and you can use and you can use for as long as you want, because if it breaks, you can fix it.
Absolutely. That's great. You said that you had experimented with Linux from a young age. Tell me the story. How did you get started with Linux? What drew you to it? What did you do with it?
I wasn't super young. I was probably high school. A buddy of mine showed me Linux. It was actually Fedora like 7.
Okay.
And a buddy of his showed him that, so it just kind of learned down, and eventually, after high school, installed, was it Mandriva, 2007 or 2008, I believe.
Okay.
And it was fascinating to see something that I actually have control over.
Right.
And that was the key. I mean, of course, I ran Windows for years, a lot of gaming and stuff like that, but being able to install my own operating system, I remember being out of college with my netbook in my hand, installing an operating system. People were giving me these weird eyes.
You know, it's interesting, going back to that, again, bringing it full circle back to that component level discussion, one of the things that I've always appreciated about Linux is if you can get your workflow to work in Linux, if you can get comfortable on a Linux workflow, it means that you can then take that operating system and put it on anything. And so I have gone everywhere from netbooks to that little, I forget I can't remember, Sony made the little Sony Vaio that fit in your pocket. It was like a little 7-inch laptop thing.
Yeah.
And I've gone from those things and scaled all the way up to a $10,000 15-inch Dell that we have that has 4 NVMe drives and like the thing is crazy. And Linux scales that way, and the workflow is identical because I can use the same desktop environment on both of those machines. I can install the same software on both of those machines. I'm not beholden to, one of the issues we were dealing with is we had a friend that had a MacBook, and he was trying to connect with VPN, and his current VPN, Mac had basically removed the VPN functionality from the latest version of Mac OS to connect with that particular VPN, so he couldn't do it. So he was trying to find third-party software, and that wasn't working, and I'm like, and there were some security issues with that particular kind of VPN. But the reality is, just taking the option away completely meant that he was fundamentally unable to use that computer to do his work. And it leads me to ask the question, why do we take those options away from users? Why do we remove those component level things? Why not leave them there? Leave the building blocks alone and let the user decide, let the rational, self-thinking human decide if they want to put those blocks back in or take those blocks back out. And I think part of your appreciation for that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is because you've grown up at a time and you have approached technology in a way that focuses on those building blocks and the value of being able to put components in and take components out and add a 9-volt battery when you want more voltage and gang up a couple of AA's when you want a longer duration and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely ties in And with the operating system factor, I can do whatever I want. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I'm running. Even it doesn't matter what distribution I'm running.
Yeah.
All the packages are there. If not, I can compile it, and I can make it do what I want it to do. And I don't have those limitations that the manufacturer or developer can say, hey, I'm going to disable this and turn off that, or like you said, get rid of a VPN. That's crazy. Why would they take away what we're using? Why would they take away the tools we need?
Right.
And that is gone with Linux. It doesn't exist. You don't have those problems. So using it, I use it every day. I use it for everything. If it's a computer, it's running Linux.
So you've even managed to get Linux working on your Microsoft Surface.
Yeah. It's not perfect. It's a Surface Pro 4.
Wow.
And yeah. Unfortunately, I wanted the hardware. I mean, it's an amazing piece of hardware. And
right.
I did the research and seen that the Surface Pro 3 had had a bunch of good Linux support. So I was like, yeah, cool. If I have to wait a little bit, no problem. And it does
Sure.
run Linux. There's some issues, but it does run Linux. Yeah.
How hard was that to actually get it installed? Because I understand there's a 32-bit bootloader that you have to basically slipstream the boot in order to get the operating system to install. Is that right? Do I have that somewhat correct?
I don't recall the Surface Pro 4 having a 32-bit bootloader. I did run into that issue on another tablet I recently installed Linux on.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and there's a great tool made, IsoSpin, I believe is what it's called, and it'll let you take an Ubuntu image, spin it out, and replace the 64-bit bootloader with 32-bit bootloader, even with a 64-bit operating system. So
okay.
that's been great on that separate tablet. For the Surface Pro, there was a pre-made ISO actually I downloaded with Linux Mint. And I'm not a huge fan of the distro, but
Sure.
It works. It's Linux, and I'm happy with it. So
yeah, any distro is better than no distro. So
yeah,
I don't have distro hate here, especially on this show. But what were some of the challenges that you ran into
with the Surface?
With the Surface Pro, getting Linux installed? Where were the pain points? If you're speaking to somebody else that's going to be doing this, what are you telling them to look out for?
Yeah, so I still don't have touchscreen support, which isn't that big of a deal. I have the little laptop keyboard and mouse thing, so the touchscreen support's not a huge deal.
Mm-hmm.
DPI is obviously something you need to look out for because it's 12-inch screen and it's over 1080p.
Is it 2K?
I think it's 2K. Yeah, it's really, really high. And there's no sleep, so that's the biggest problem I have is I'd like to just put everything to sleep and let it be. So you're going to have to shut down. You try to sleep, you can't turn it back on. Some of these issues have been solved. I've tried to solve them. I'm just not, I don't know, I can't figure it out myself. But the touchscreen, I guess, has been solved. And from what I've seen, even the sleep issue has been solved. I just haven't figured it out yet.
So it's interesting that you say that because I have a first-generation Surface, and I have the same issues. I don't have all the same issues. My touchscreen works, but I have a problem with the suspend. I have circumvented that problem. Primarily, if it was my main machine, it would be completely unacceptable because when I buy a computer, I need all of the functionality and features of the computer to work. So if it was my only machine, it would be a deal stopper. But the Surface is kind of the computer that sits inside of my bag, kind of the spare machine. If we're out doing something, it's like I need to run a task for a little bit. I'll throw it up on the Surface and let it run that way. Or my bedside computer, that kind of a thing. So for those things, I don't really mind about the sleep. I just shut the thing down. But it'd be interesting if I'll sync up with you later, and if there is a way to get that to work, I'd be interested to hear how that is.
That'd be great.
Chat room is giving me a hard time. They're saying I installed Windows on my Surface. I did not. What advice do you have for? Let's say I'm going to reset for a second. You're talking to the 12-year-old you, and knowing what you know now about technology and the direction of where technology is going, what advice would you give him about playing with electronics and technology?
I would tell him to focus more on what you're doing. Definitely focus more on what you're doing and dive a bit deeper. I was a bit scatterbrained. I would work on little things here, throw it aside, work on little things there, throw it aside. So focus is the biggest thing, I think. And that's the key. You want to do something, you got to focus on it, and you got to get really, really good at it. So I'd get kind of good at a lot of things. Jack of all trades, I guess, but the master of none. So
yeah. Well, I don't know about that. I would say when it comes to, I would say, is it a fair assumption to say that you are a master at wiring, and understanding electricity and electronics?
Yeah. I mean, not so much the small electronic stuff, but typical AC line stuff like that. I'm definitely getting there. There's always more to learn. Always more to learn.
Yeah.
So I'm getting there.
And having an open mind really plays into that.
Yeah, definitely.
So are you still on Linux Mint these days?
Oh, no, I mean, I run Arch on my main system.
You do?
Yeah, Linux Mint's just on the surface. But I mean, I run pretty much everything. I even have OpenSUSE on my media center. So
okay,
whatever serves its purpose. I just like to hop around a little bit. But I've been running Arch on my 2013 Bonobo since I got it. Reinstalled Arch on there, and the same install is still running.
Awesome. So do you have a site or a Twitter or anything that you want to plug where people can follow if they want to find out more information? Nope.
No, just Telegram, I guess. ESC476 on Telegram.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't do any social media.
Yeah, and you're in the Ask Noah group, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely. They can connect with you that way. Jeff, thanks so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate having you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Again, phone lines 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email live@asknoahshow.com. Let's go to the phones. Eugene is calling from Russia. Hey, Eugene, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir. Thanks for calling in all the way from Russia. How can we help?
And, well, first of all, I would like to thank you and all the JB crew for the show. I'm a huge JB fan listener for 5 years now, starting from Ubuntu 13.04 review. Huge fan and advocate of the network. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. It's my pleasure.
Okay. So, turning to the question, I have a question about my smartphone. I have this 3-year-old phone. Here is the link in the IRC, which may sound old, but at the same time, it has 4 gigs of RAM, Intel x86 processor inside, and since I don't play games or something like this, these specs are enough for me. So, well, in addition, I've been a happy Lineage OS user since CyanogenMod before the fork. But, well, I choose Lineage OS because I've chosen Lineage OS because I didn't expect the vendor supporting the device for a long time.
Right.
And I've expected this from Lineage community, but unfortunately, since February this year, Lineage OS has dropped support for the phone. And now I have this pretty powerful device receiving no updates. And keeping in mind I have some banking apps, lots of personal stuff on the device, I consider OS updates to be crucial things. So could you recommend the replacement for Lineage OS with GF support, or following the previous discussion with the guest, I should turn to the recommendation from Lineage OS site and try building the solution myself?
Yeah, I mean that would be great because you'd help the next generation of people that are interested. But I guess my recommendation, and I'd have to have your exact model phone to be able to tell you if this would work directly. There's an alternative Android ROM called ELO, E-E-L-O. I'll have a link for you in the show notes. And what it is an upcoming Android distribution that's based on Lineage OS. And it's being created by one of the developers of Mandrake Linux. So the idea is that you have an open source mobile operating system that is completely free from Google. And ELO promises to have its own cloud and email services to give you an Android-free experience. And the only downside to ELO is it's in the very, very, very infant stages of development because they're just starting up. But and I would again, if you if you're on Telegram or if you send an email into live@asknoahshow.com, I will, with the exact model number for you, I can get some more detailed answers.
We have some problems with Telegram here in Russia, you know?
Oh, right. That was a dumb thing to say. Okay, well, email. You have email. I'm sorry, my friend.
The funny thing is, I'm still on Telegram because our government is not successful in blocking it.
We talked about that on the Ask Noah show. I feel like an idiot. I'm so sorry. But yeah, Eugene, I'll have a link for you in the show notes. If you head over to podcast.asknoahshow.com/62, I'll have that information available for you in the show notes. And if you send me an email live@asknoahshow.com, then if you send me with your exact model number, I'll send that information to you directly. Matthew is calling from California. Hey, Matthew, welcome to the Ask Noah show.
Hey, Noah, how you doing today? It's good to talk to you again.
Excellent, sir. Same to you. How can we help?
Well, to set the stage, I had pinged you on Telegram last week about an idea I had to help sort of kickstart my consulting business. And I remembered you telling the story about how when you were first starting out with AltaSpeed, that you would basically just go into hotels and say, hey, maybe I can do this one thing for you and see how you like it, and then we'll go from there. Sort of that sort of method for getting your foot in the door. Do I remember that correctly?
Yes, you sure do.
Yeah. So as I had said, I have this coffee shop near me that I love, and their Wi-Fi is horrible. And so the thought process that I was going through was offering perhaps to do a temporary install of some Ubiquiti equipment, access points, and controller, and see if we couldn't improve the experience as a way of maybe getting my foot in the door to getting them as a client.
Absolutely.
But I've never really used any of that hardware before. I've only heard you talk about it. And so I didn't know how easy it would be to get something like that up and running. I didn't know how many access points per square foot kind of thing that you usually do when you're doing an installation.
Sure.
So those are sort of where my questions are.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I also have some questions about best practices with businesses, with running a business in terms of like business licenses and bonding insurance and those kinds of things too. But
Sure.
That may be for another phone call.
Yeah, maybe. We got some time yet. Oh, let's dig into this as best we can.
Okay.
So let's start from the beginning. So first, actually setting up UniFi access points is one of the most brain-dead simple things, easy to do. Basically, they have a PPA, and you add the PPA into an Ubuntu box, and then you install the UniFi software. Now, the UniFi software runs
and that doesn't need to be at. Sorry, that doesn't need to be at the location. That can be in the cloud or on DigitalOcean or back at my shop or whatever, right?
Let me get to that. So you install the software as a service and basically browse to the IP address of the server that you've installed it on, and you'll be greeted with a web control panel, which will allow you to do everything in a very simple GUI fashion. Now, can you host it on a cloud or you can host it locally? The answer to that question is both. It's how you set up the access points to be discovered is what determines that. So, for example, if you install it on a server and plug it into the exact same network, when the access point boots up, it automatically will discover that server, and you'll just see your access point pop in and say, would you like to adopt this access point into that particular environment? Now, if you want to go multiple environments, like let's say you have 5 coffee shops, you want them each to have their own SSID, you want them each to have their own separate password, you want them each to have their own separate user controls. The way to do that is you'd have to store the server or run the server on like DigitalOcean or Amazon or something like that. Now, the problem with that is you no longer have that option of local network discovery. And so the way we fix that, or at least the way we do it at AltaSpeed, is there's a couple different ways to do it. You can do it with a DHCP option. The way we do it is with the DNS entry. So in the router, we tell the DHCP server that the first DNS server is, in fact, the router itself. And then in the router itself, we create an entry called UniFi. And that resolves to the public IP address of our UniFi server. And so when you plug any access point into a network that has been configured by us, by default, that access point is going to populate inside of our server. And then you just click adopt and it's good to go. Now, that's a very simple, easy, straightforward way to get that set up and running. Doesn't take a lot of time, doesn't cost it doesn't cost a lot of money. You can rent a $5 DigitalOcean droplet. You can run it on your server at home and just forward the ports. You could spin it up on an Amazon EC2 instance. Now, as far as how many access points to buy, how densely to populate that area, what you're looking for in access points is 20 decibels, that's 20 dB, of separation between access points. And the reason for that is a lot of people have this misconception that the stronger the Wi-Fi signal is, the better. And that's not entirely true, because what you end up having is one Wi-Fi signal starts to interfere with the second Wi-Fi signal. And so so what you do is you log into the access point, and you'll be able to see neighbors so you set up the first access point, you'll be able to see neighbors. You take the second access point and you walk further and further away until you have about 20 dB of separations. And at that point, that's where you put that second access point. Now, I can give you a ballpark. In a concrete constructed hotel with access points in the hallways, which is not ideal. If you can, you always want to get them in the hotel room. But if you can't, the access points in the hallway, you are looking at 1 access point per 25 feet. Now, in a wide-open coffee shop, you might not need more than 1 access point. One might cover the whole place if it's all in one room and you're not penetrating concrete walls. And that's why I say the correct answer is 20 dB of separation. The issue I had is when I was first starting out and I would get that answer, 25 dB of separation, I would sit down at CDW to go order access points, and it's like, well, how many access points do I order? Should I order 1? Should I order 2? Should I order 10? 20? I don't know, and I won't know what 20 dB of separation is until I have a couple of them here and I can tweak them. So if you're looking for a rough starting area, 1 every 25 feet, that's in the most densely anti-radio room thing we've ever done, and we seem to get good performance 1 every 25 feet. Now that's it, with room distance is only 12 feet each direction or whatever, so there's that. But that should get you started. Does that answer your question? Does that give you a pretty good start?
Pretty good start. The other question, I mean, the follow-up is, I assume these access points run over power over Ethernet. And I have absolutely no idea. Okay, they can, but they can also be run just plugged into the wall. Is that?
Well, one of the things I like about Unify is for the $200 or whatever, when you buy the access point, it comes with a power over Ethernet injector. So there's a couple of different ways to do this. The first way is you can literally just right where you put the access point, especially what you'll find is if you're ever retrofitting a place, if they've tried to install Wi-Fi themselves, a lot of times they'll take consumer-grade routers and they'll just scatter them all over the place. If you're replacing that kind of scenario, you can just unplug the router from the wall that's acting as an access point and plug the PoE injector right into the wall where it was and just have the power injector right next to the access point. Obviously, if you're going from scratch or if you're running the cable, if you have the ability, it's nice to get all those power injectors in a central location. Better yet, you can buy a switch from Ubiquiti. I think they're about $400, and it has PoE built into the switch. So that way you don't even have to, because one of the things you'll find that's kind of a pain, if you get into any size, any scale to the thing, you start getting 200 access points. 200 Ethernet power injectors is a lot to put inside of a room and power. And and just to meet fire code regulations, electrical regulations, especially if you're in California, man, that could be tough.
Yeah.
So I just looked here. So it's $438 for a 24-port managed switch. That is the 250-watt version. So I mean, you could run. I mean, and again, for a coffee shop, I'm probably just putting a single power injector. That comes with the access point.
That would definitely be overkill. I don't know what kind of infrastructure they have in there. When I sit in there and I look around, I don't see any access points. My assumption is that they got business internet from AT&T, and AT&T gave them a router, and they set it up, and that's the end of it. Because I haven't seen any cables run, and I haven't seen any access points anywhere. So that's there's only room for improvement. So that's why I'm kind of hoping this might be a sort of a soft target for for starting the business. So so that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, Matthew, if you think about it, if you're a small business owner and you own a coffee shop, you undoubtedly have people that are sitting there and saying, I really want good Wi-Fi. I really want good Wi-Fi. I really want good Wi-Fi. And so when you have a guy that comes in and doesn't say, that guy right there, you still wanted to come? You don't have time? That's fine. If it works, it works. If not, that's fine. If you continually have Wi-Fi issues, and you have somebody that comes in and they don't say, for $2,000, I'll solve this problem for you. Because I'll be honest with you, at the level that AltaSpeed has grown to, if we go into a coffee shop, I'm not giving services away anymore. Like we did that to get our foot in the door. We did that to show that we are a competent player in the field and can do a really great job and provide really great service. But these days, like, we have too much work. I'm trying to pare down work. So if we get a company that calls us and they're reaching out to us and they're asking us to do these kinds of things. But you have to look at it from the perspective of that coffee shop owner. If he walks in and says, hey, I don't have Wi-Fi. I have people complaining about Wi-Fi. What can I do about this? And you're the guy that shows up and says, hey, I could provide this for you. I could do this Wi-Fi for you, and I'm not going to charge you anything. Just, the thank you from me is if you could tell your friends when they need Wi-Fi, send them my way. I would really appreciate that. That is going to go so far, and you will buy something far more valuable. Trust. And trust is something that can't really be purchased. You can't put a dollar amount on it. And the closest you're going to get is saying, I will give away my services, which I value at X, and I will give away this equipment, which I value at Y, and so the cost is Z. That's what you're paying for that trust, but you can't buy it any other way. You just kind of have to do it. Again, phone lines this hour are open, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Adam joins us from Vancouver. He's here with us at Linuxfest Northwest. Hey, Adam, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Thanks, Noah. Good to be here.
Yeah, so you and I have talked over the past couple of years. We've had a pretty decent ongoing relationship, I'd like to think. And you came up and said, well, when you're starting the show, I'd really like to chat with you and ask some questions. I said, hey, man, sit down, ask him right live, while we're here. And, of course, you brought your Sony camera, which I envy. So tell me, how can we help?
So we've been, I had my company for about 2.5 years, totally based on open source tech. I think every single developer that we have, maybe with an exception of one.
Okay.
They all run on all various flavors of Ubuntu.
Sure.
I'm Katie Neon myself. Even our chief commercial officer, a C-level guy, is on Linux, running KDE Neon as well on an old Lenovo.
Okay.
So one of the things that we do is we put on a meetup twice a month, but every 2 weeks, and we are in the stage of getting all that stuff live, and so obviously we're interested in some of the free and open source tooling to start streaming these things in a more professional way. So we've tried Periscope before, and Google Hangouts and other things to live stream a presenter that we have on our meetup that happens, shameless plug, every Thursday.
Okay, and where can they go to see to listen?
You can just take a look at meetup.com and look at the microservices meetup in Vancouver area. A lot of those are streamed, and so my question is exactly how to do this a lot more professionally, because we want to capture the video of the speaker presenting their presentation from their laptop.
Sure.
And then, of course, we have one of those Owl Labs 360 camera speaker microphone combos, which pans around for Q&A, which works really well for meetings, for business meetings, but also does a good job for meetups.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the question is, how do we wire up, the source, the three sources? You got the presentation going, you've got the speaker waving their hands and being funny, etc., and then you have the interaction with the audience, so asking questions.
Right.
And so you have these three sources. One, obviously, just video or still pictures, the presentation, probably just video. Then you have audio-video combination for the other two sources. And I'm thinking OBS, but what's a good way to do that? Is it one of the person's laptops in the audience? Is there a separate person with a laptop dedicated to that? What's a good way of light way of doing that?
Sure. Well, as with any project, it depends on your budget. So that's the first disclaimer. So we'll start with the least expensive but not best way to do it, and we'll work our way up to the absolute best way to do it, and the way we're actually doing it here. So the cheapest, easiest, quick and dirtiest way to do it is you can use something called Xcompositor inside of OBS to capture the windows and the screens of the computer that you're actually streaming on. So you could run OBS, a streaming software, on your local machine, and you could open the windows and just capture those windows.
Okay.
Now, there is a Linuxfest that streams all of their talks, and that is what they're doing. They are capturing the window of the presenter's machine. OBS is running on that particular machine. Okay. Downsides to doing that. One, you have to reset up that capture every single time for whatever window you want to capture. You don't have as much control over sizing and spacing and stuff like that. So, for example, if you ever watch any of the Jupiter Broadcasting shows, when Chris is showing his screen, it's framed in the center of whatever the graphic arts that are around it.
Yep.
And you don't see anything except what he wants you to see. You don't see his address bar. You don't see the bar down below. You don't see any of his notifications. And that's because he set that shot up to only capture that particular part of the screen.
Yes.
And that's a little bit more difficult to do in software because it changes dynamically. The size of the window changes. The application name changes. If you go from Google Chrome to Firefox, if you visit a different website, all of those things will change. But you don't need any extra hardware to do it. It can be done completely on free software.
Okay,
so
that's really good.
That's way number one. Way number two, slightly better way. is to use these little USB HDMI capture devices. Actually, our technical director, Chase Nunez, who runs a broadcasting podcast production company and actually does a lot of live broadcasting and calling of pinball games and stuff at geekgamer.tv. He has these little $120 devices made by a company called Camlink, and it's a USB HDMI capture device.
Okay.
So you can have one computer that's the presenter screen, another machine that is running the OBS software, and the OBS software is then capturing whatever comes in over that HDMI input. Now, that could be a laptop, that could be a DVD player, that could be a regular camera, and you can just pull that source in, and now you can tweak that shot, and it will appear the exact same way no matter what source is feeding that cam link.
Okay.
Problems with the cam link, you're going to run out of USB bandwidth, an issue that kind of hit us earlier on here today. You get 2 or 3 of those plugged into a system, and I'd say 1 or 2 tops in a laptop, and you're going to see the next, as you plug the next one in, the first one falls off.
Yes.
Because you're running out of USB bandwidth. You're physically exceeding the limitations of that system. So the next step up is to go with PCI capture. And there's 2 ways to do PCI capture, and maybe I'll get Chase's take on this too in a second. There are 2 ways to do PCI capture. The first is you can actually put a PCI HDMI capture card in the computer. The second way, and the way that Chase had recommended to me, and I tried it, and I've actually, believe it or not, I've actually had less problems with that than doing it the traditional way of doing PCI captures. You put a dedicated USB card in the computer that actually has 4 individual USB buses, and then put each one of those cam links on one of those USB buses. And you've been playing with this back in your setup, and it's been rock solid, right?
Oh yeah, no. So many different companies make this. The one that I'm recommending is the Sonnet one.
Right.
They make 2 different versions. One is I think $50 or $60. It gives you 4 USB 3.0 ports, but it's all a shared, I think, 5 gigabit bus. However, they make a second card that gives you 5 gigabit bus on every individual port. So your only potential bottleneck is going to be your PCI Express slot, if anything. Right. If you have a computer made in the last, say, 5 years or so, you're going to be fine. The kicker with even with the cam link is, especially with the cam link, you got to give it specifically what it's looking for. So if it's looking for 1080p 60, that's what you got to give it.
Sure.
There's no transcoding options with it, or you can't, no scaling options, excuse me. So you can't change it if you want to down-res it. That's where a benefit like a Magewell USB stick will give you more options. But for cost effectiveness, the cam links, it's by Elgato, by the way.
Yes.
Can't be beat. They cannot be beat.
So we'll have a link to both the Elgato Camlink and the Sonnet Allegro Pro USB 3.0 PCI Express card. We'll have links to both of those in the show notes. So if you head over to podcast.asknoahshow.com/62, we'll have those there for you if you're interested in doing the same. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue for us is the logistics of our operation, and that we have not a standard regular studio where we have the meetups or a company. So we go from usually between 2 different companies that host our meetup to perhaps a third option if none of those ones are available. We count them as sponsors, and they're really excellent members of the community, so they always help us out, but sometimes they have bookings that they just can't move. So we have to have this a little bit more mobile, and so me dragging a large computer with a lot of stuff in there would be prohibitive. So I'm thinking, we have to really, also make sure that the speaker has something that can capture some video on their laptop, which may be prohibitive to some of these people that just bring in God knows what, some old Windows machine or a MacBook or something. Then we really don't have much control, nor do we really want to be poking around with those proprietary systems for them. We kind of want to have something from their HDMI, so one of these little $120 cards in between their display and their computer to capture everything that they're showing would probably be best. And then obviously capture the other cameras on a separate machine, right? So the Owl Labs thing would be one, and one video source that we just continue to capture and record. For post-production, it's fine, because then we can take all those 3 sources and combine them and mix them depending on which is great. But the key is that a lot of people are interested in joining live because they can ask questions.
Yes.
The community is small in Vancouver, but it's fairly relatively large globally, so we have to do this on a global scale. Not that it's super popular or anything, but it's just to gather enough people with the same interest, you have to go global. So we need to have that influx of people all over the world to be able to, make it worthwhile. So I'm guessing that combined with OBS to be able to switch for the live feed what the presentation is, and then to the OWL would kind of be the minimum ability. So I'm thinking the first option that you gave, and then of course my second part to this question is also we do a podcast as well, which is a little bit more focused on tech and runs less often than every week from Advanced Media, and we had another question about producing, translating some of the stuff with some video overlays and publishing on YouTube. There's been some issues with getting the exact resolutions onto something that's high quality on YouTube versus what encoders do you guys use, etc., to get the level of output. I mean, I can do some basic things in Blender and maybe have pay someone to polish them up a little bit.
Right.
But then I want to be able to use them and mix them and publish them to YouTube to be at the highest resolutions for those that have the bandwidth and want to have a nice picture to look at. So what's your recommendation for all those encoders for being able to publish on YouTube? Because it seems to be quite a common source for people to go to for content, and we want to be able to splice up our episodes and give 17, 12-minute, sound bites of a particular topic for people that don't want to listen to an entire hour-and-a-half interview with someone on a very technical topic.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. So first of all, I want you to take a look. This is the cam link from Elgato. So you can take a look at it here. Those of you that are listening, you'll have to use your imagination, but it is a really cool device, no bigger than a little Wi-Fi USB dongle.
Yeah.
So I'll start by answering your question by saying this. In the production world, we have a saying, and it's called garbage in, garbage out. And basically the idea is that you can never end up with a finalized product better than what you started with.
Yeah.
And so what you need to understand is when you're going into it, you always... So we separate it into two different things. We have the published format, which is what everyone sees. We have another format that we call the acquisition format. And the acquisition format is absolutely as high quality as possible.
Yep.
We start with the absolute highest quality source material that we can, and then we condense it down for consumption. I'll give you an example. When we do commercials at Alta Speed, if we produce a commercial for a company, or we produce a promo video or something like that, the acquisition format is uncompressed video, essentially. There's actually no really true such thing. Everything has its own little encoding mechanism, right? But it's as close to uncompressed as you can get. But that means that the source files can be terabytes of footage, even for a 15 or 20 minute thing. And then we take that acquisition material, we bring it into our editor, we edit it up however we're going to do it, and there's a really great editor called Lightworks. It's made by a company called EditShare, and the thing that Lightworks does that I think is really neat, that a lot of the other open source editors don't do, is multi-camera editing. So you can have 4 cameras and record 4 different sources, or you can record on OBS and have the start of the switch, whatever, and bring that into the editor, and in post, play director and say, okay, I want this camera, that camera, this camera. We really should have had the shot on that guy. You can do all of that in post inside of Lightworks. Then when you're done, you actually render it out. Now, I'm going to get hate mail for saying this on the air, and it's just speaking the truth. The reality is, we would like to say as open source advocates that you should use OGG and publish to MKV and all that stuff. The truth of the matter is, you're going to get the best results by publishing to MP4 because that's what everybody's device wants to play. And encoding that MPEG video and containering it in MP4 and use MP3 or AAC for the audio, something like that. And that's what's going to play best on a bunch of people's devices. Now, there's a number of different ways to take that acquisition terabytes of footage and condense it down into a couple hundred megs or whatever, gigabyte or whatever it is. What I use for the Ask Noah show is a custom FFmpeg command, and I'll give that to you. I'll have that command linked in the show notes as well.
Great.
So that's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do is you can use a piece of software like a GUI tool like Handbrake, and you can use that to encode the video. And the Handbrake standard profile is actually pretty decent.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I saw this problem was when I was trying to just simply put up maybe a 15, not even a 15-minute, maybe a 5-minute screencast of using Fish Shell or something on my computer to show some scripting things and some concepts. Going through to some other screencasts of people, it was as if I was watching their native resolution on my screen when I full screened that YouTube, right?
Right.
And then once I looked at my uploaded stuff, I'm like, I'm not getting the right encoding because I am not seeing that pixel perfect kind of rendition. And of course, then I have to go back to the editor, zoom in on areas of the screen, etc.
Yeah.
And I'd rather not. This is probably someone, whoever's watching is probably looking at this at work because it's related, and they probably have it on the monitor, and they actually do want to see the nice crispness and all that, and look at my environment. So kind of wanted to get those points behind your answers here, and thank you.
Excellent. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Again, phone lines are open, 1-855-450-NO. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Simon Quigley, producer, Director of Operations at Ultimate. You got a promotion, I guess. Somebody did that. Nobody ran it by me, so I would have put the kibosh on that. So you guys are doing some cool things at the Lubuntu project. You are now the release manager for the Lubuntu team. Mm-hmm. And so talk to me about that. What kind of cool things are you guys doing at Lubuntu? So Kubuntu. You're also on Kubuntu team.
Right.
You basically do all the Linuxes.
Well, I'm just generally an Ubuntu person, but in Kubuntu in Kubuntu and Lubuntu, we just had our 1804 release that was Thursday. So for both Kubuntu and Lubuntu, that's supported for the next 3 years until 2021, if I'm doing my math right in my head. So with Kubuntu, we're shipping the latest LTS Plasma release. So that's Plasma 5.12.4. I think we're shipping stock, and then we're going to continue shipping bug fix releases as it goes on, and then the underlying Qt stack and whatever else, that's going to be it's all in the upstream LTS, and we're following that through. So that's going to continue to get updates throughout the LTS cycle. It really is a nice release because you have the latest LTS Plasma on top of the latest LTS Qt on top of an LTS Ubuntu, and it really is a nice combination of software. Lots of different customizations you can do, lots of different new things in Plasma. I'm really excited for the Kubuntu release. I'm also excited for the Lubuntu release because, it's a little bit like just previous releases. So we have the LXDE desktop, latest bug fix releases with those. Then with that, in both of the installer for Lubuntu and Kubuntu, we have the minimal install option. So you can click a little checkbox in the installer, and it will lessen the applications that are installed by default. So you can just, if you don't want some of the applications that are installed, I know with Kubuntu it doesn't ship some of the like the personal identity management or like the contacts and whatever else. It doesn't ship all of that by default, and then there's and then in Lubuntu it doesn't ship I know a lot of people replace things with Abby. They replace Abby Word with LibreOffice, that sort of thing. So that's really a nice option that's available now in the installer. Other than that, it's a nice LTS release. The first LTS release in 2 years, so it's really a nice thing. And then, so if you're running 1710 for either Kubuntu or Lubuntu, you will get the upgrade notice. Well, you should have already. 1710 will be supported for another 3 months, and then if you're on 1604, once we hit 1804.1 in July, you will get the upgrade notice for that. So it's funny that you mentioned the stack of LTS. Yeah.
Okay. The thing that is great about that, so this machine right here, the broadcast machine that Chase was given praise to earlier, the reason that we went to it, and I'll be honest with you, Chris was the one that was pushing me towards it, and I had a little bit of a pushback because I was like, man, 1804 just came out. I think maybe we should look back at 1604. And he says, no, man, all that LTS stacking on top of one another means that this is the way to get the most reliable system.
Right.
And so this is an 1804 LTS machine, Kubuntu LTS machine. We tried Xubuntu. We've tried Ubuntu Mate. We tried Ubuntu proper 1604 with Unity. We've tried GNOME. None of them just work as well as Kubuntu. I mean, Kubuntu is just the most stable desktop operating system if you want to get day-to-day work done. It also offers a tremendous amount of flexibility, and so that's why I'm running it here on my laptop. I've got it on this spare laptop that we have over here. Chris has it on his XPS. You don't know it, but I took your laptop while you were sleeping last night and installed Kubuntu. I mean, it's on everything. And so I really appreciate all the work that you and the Kubuntu team isn't actually that large. It's just a couple of people, right?
Yeah, it's me, and then there's Rick Mills. Otherwise, it's not that many people. Well, of course, we have the whole Kubuntu team. Like the release manager, Valerie Zimmerman, is here. Otherwise, the Kubuntu team is pretty small.
But as far as development, making changes, fixing bugs and stuff, that's you and one other guy.
Right.
That's awesome. So talk to me about the automation that you must have had to put into place to make that happen.
Right, so we have a bunch of different scripts that I think, well, we've changed them over time, and we fix bugs over time, but they're a little bit old. But we have automation that we can run one script, and it will do a new Plasma release or a new release of a KD stack. We can upload that to like a PPA or something, get some testing on it, and then if it looks good and if the packaging looks same, we just release it. So we have a lot of that automated at this point. That's with like the KD stack, and then with the Qt stack, it's a little bit more involved, but of course, because it's the Qt stack, it's a little bit complex. Otherwise, there's a lot of automation that goes around that, a lot of just automated scripting. It's nothing special, really.
And then on top of that, staying on top of tickets, staying on top of bug reports as they come in, making sure that those are addressed, lickety split.
Right. And the thing with the LTS stacks is that, a month from now, a year from now, you'll still get bug fix updates because upstream it still has support. So upstream they're still putting updates in there.
Sure.
So
that's awesome. I think that's terrific. So now I want to switch topics. I want to shift a little bit, and I want to talk about, Lubuntu, which I know is a lot of people have this idea that Lubuntu is just for low-level machines, low-power machines, stuff like that. But the truth of the matter is you guys have given a facelift to Lubuntu, and it looks better than ever this year.
Yeah, so with regular Lubuntu, with regular LXD Ubuntu, the major thing artwork-wise that's changed is we have like a new background that I think looks wonderful. It's not the usual like geometric patterns we've had the last couple of years. It is a nice like space background. But with Lubuntu Next is really where a lot of the development work goes these days. So it's Lubuntu with LXQT. Our plan is to transition onto that sometime soon.
Okay.
So that ships with the Arc theme by default. It ships with Papyrus icons. And that space background. So the blend of all of that, it looks pretty well, or looks pretty good. But,
sure.
We ship in Lubuntu Next, which, like I said, a lot of the development work is going into it. We didn't actually release it this time for the LTS. We didn't actually release it, but it ships with LibreOffice. It ships with the new KDE Falcon browser, which it used to be Kupzilla, but now it's KDE Falcon, and they have a new logo, and it's a really nice browser, and just a set of applications that we really think people will use. So I know in regular Lubuntu, not to say that the applications don't work as well, but you don't find people using nowadays, you don't find people using AbiWord or Numeric as often as like LibreOffice, for example.
Right.
So, yeah.
So it's the distro that caters to the things that the other distros don't cater to.
Right, and another thing with Lubuntu Next is we are no longer going to use Ubiquity. So we are going to use the Calamares installer, which is a distro-independent installer framework. So
gotcha.
It's a very modular installer, the way it's put together, and it will allow a lot of flexibility going forward. So
now, would you recommend Lubuntu to a person who they need a solid workstation, they need a solid computer for work or for home business or something like that, not just something they're playing around with, not something for development, this is just a day-to-day operating system? Is it something you put grandma on?
Lubuntu, yes, I would put grandma on Lubuntu.
Okay.
Lubuntu Next, though, Lubuntu Next just needs a little bit of tweaks here and there, and it is otherwise pretty rock solid.
Okay.
So. Yeah.
Awesome. I want to pivot and this is a little self-serving for a little bit, but one of the things that I was thinking about, and you and I had a conversation last night. We were talking about a couple different things, but one of the things I'm just proud of, and it's interesting now to be able to talk to you both as the community manager for or the release manager for Lubuntu, and then tell you, okay, now I want you to put your Altispeed hat on for a second, and you deal with a lot of our internal operations at Altispeed, coordinating technicians, coordinating remote support, and the thing is, we are a group of people that make a lot of money off of open source, right? And as I was driving home last night after I dropped you off, I started to think, is that something I should scale back? Is that something I should feel guilty about making, money, making a living off of these people? Because I come to these conferences to give back, not to take from people. Right, and I guess what I came to, and I'd be interested to get your take on this, is I feel like in a lot of ways we do things, I feel like we care more about actual Linux than a lot of people do. Is that fair?
Well, I mean, there's different degrees to that. Some people who care about it, just for development. Some people who care about it for different things. I mean, it really depends. But we do care a lot about Linux.
Well, that's awesome, and that's a pleasure to work with you. Hey, guys, did you know this show is available as a downloadable podcast? To subscribe to the feed or download the latest episode, visit podcast.asknoahshow.com. There you'll find the latest episode. Of course, follow us on Twitter @AskNoahShow. The Ask Noah Show continues next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. A huge thanks to Vox Telsus for providing our phone system, better producer, and Sarah, our call screener. This hour of the show may be over, but there's plenty more content for you 24/7 at AskNoahShow.com.